Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the National World War II Museum. It's a pleasure to see such a packed house tonight, and I can tell you you're all in for a good show after having spent the day with tonight's speaker and having read most of the book. Don't tell him I haven't read all of it yet, but most of the book. We are pleased here to have C-SPAN that wanted to come down and film Mr. Jordan's presentation. We've had a nice relationship with them over the years, and it's great that not only will our members across the world be able to view this on our website, but also C-SPAN's going to be airing this hopefully soon. Tonight's speaker, Jonathan Jordan, is the author of the award-winning book, Lone Star Navy, Texas, the Fight for the Gulf of Mexico, and the Shaping of the American West. Some of you may have read one, many, or all of his writings on the Second World War, personalities, battles, and weapons, which have appeared in publications such as World War II Magazine, Armchair General, Military History Magazine, MHQ, so on and so forth. He's a contributing author to the book The Armchair Reader, World War II, and The Armchair Reader, The Amazing Book of World History. He is also the editor of the Library of Texas edition to the People of Texas. Mr. Jordan is the son of an Air Force pilot and Vietnam veteran. He grew up on military bases throughout the country, Ohio, New Jersey, Alabama, and also in the Philippine Islands. One would think that with all of his writings, his historical writings, his full-time job is as a historian. But Mr. Jordan is actually a practicing attorney out of Atlanta, Georgia. We are pleased to have him here at the National World War II Museum in New Orleans. So, ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to the author of Brothers, Rivals, Victors, Eisenhower, Patton, Bradley, and the partnership that drove the Allied conquest in Europe, Mr. Jonathan Jordan.
Thanks very much, Jeremy, for that kind introduction. And thanks to the National World War II Museum for allowing me to come out for a few minutes and share some war stories about three of America's most impressive soldiers. The title of the book is Brothers, Rivals, Victors. And that title, those three words, are about the only part of the book that weren't revised, cut out, slashed up, taken out, put back in, sliced, diced, and excised since I put pen to paper back in 2006. The reason the title alone survived 5 years of editorial bloodletting is because those three words, brothers, rivals, victors, to me sum up a partnership of three American generals who produced one of the most extraordinary results in our nation's history. So with that, I'd like to spend a few minutes sharing some stories about the brotherhood, the rivalry, and ultimately the victory in Western Europe that was Eisenhower, Bradley, and Patton. Now, the brotherhood began almost a century ago this summer in August of 1911 at the United States Military Academy in West Point, New York. It began when a young cadet from Abilene, Kansas, who for all practical purposes, had never left the state of Kansas before, met another young cadet from Moberly, Missouri, who, for all practical purposes, had never left Randolph County, Missouri. Well, the cadets, Dwight Eisenhower, universally known to his friends as Ike, and Omar Bradley, known more familiarly as Brad, became fast friends at the academy. Now, while West Point was designed to instill martial qualities and bring out the military sciences in their students, neither Ike nor Brad were particularly militant back in those days. Eisenhower was a notorious rule breaker, particularly when those rules concerned cigarettes or curfews. Brad, for his part, was a good, solid soldier. He actually outranked Ike by the time they graduated from West Point. But he wasn't the kind of guy who would stand out in either a crowd or a classroom. He was just sort of a quiet guy. Well, while these two cadets didn't stand out in the classroom or even sometimes in a crowd, they did stand out in one place where they could fight their battles on fields of grass. Their love of sports was what brought them together and forged a relationship that would last till the end of their days. As a young man, Ike's sport was football. He was a solid defensive tackle who cracked helmets occasionally with sports legend Jim Thorpe. He was an above-average plunging back, which nowadays we would call a running back. And until he injured his knee in a football play, football was Ike's passion. Even after the injury derailed his sports career and very nearly derailed Eisenhower's military career, he had to ask the doctor to certify him, and that took some talking. Eisenhower loved football. He participated as a cheerleader before his graduation, and shortly after graduating, he still worked as a small-town football coach. And it was this football coaching mentality that would affect his later style of management when it was more than just a game at stake. Brad enjoyed football, and he played with Eisenhower, but his passion was not on the gridiron. It was on the diamond. He had a rocket throw of an arm. For a while, Omar Bradley held the West Point record for longest baseball throw. And he had a mean curveball. His senior year, he batted a .383 average. That's swinging his slugger to a very respectable number that I think any professional team nowadays, including our New Orleans Zephyrs, would certainly value. Well, there was another thing that brought the two young men together, another trait they shared in common that occurred after graduation. It was that they would miss the Great War, the war to end all wars, the war in Europe that so many of their classmates got to fight in. This was a war that brought promotion, chestfuls of medals, experience, and reputation to those men in uniform who were fortunate enough to serve there. Bradley's regiment spent its wartime spread out from Alaska to Montana on guard duty. His regiment, the 14th Infantry, didn't even get around to assembling to go over to France until just before the bells began to ring out in celebration of the armistice in Europe. Eisenhower spent the war on the other side of the continent. He made a name for himself as a trainer, partly because he was such a good football coach. But unfortunately for Ike, that meant the Army, which liked Ike, didn't want him fighting the Kaiser in Europe. It wanted him training other men to fight the Kaiser in Europe. So Eisenhower wrote out his days during the war to end all wars at Camp Meade, Maryland, a place where he trained men who were fighting in a newfangled group the Army put together called the Tank Corps. Well, the Brotherhood grew in 1919 after the First World War ended, when Lieutenant Colonel Eisenhower met a hard-charging Californian named George Patton. Patton had, until that time, a storybook career as an officer. He had excelled in individual sports at West Point, like running and fencing. In fact, he represented the United States in the 1912 Stockholm Olympics in the modern pentathlon. He was the Army's master fencer, a consummate polo player. He redesigned the Army's cavalry saber, and he chased Pancho Villa around northern Mexico with General Blackjack Pershing. When war came to America's shores, Patton shipped overseas with General Pershing. He participated in 2 great battles, and he was badly wounded at the Meuse-Argonne attack in September of 1918. He was recovering from his wound on November the 11th of that year, a date that was doubly significant to Patton, for it was his 33rd birthday, and it was the day that his hopes for more battles, more military glory were dashed as Germany capitulated to the Allies. Well, Patton returned home in 1919, a frankly depressed man, while Bradley and Eisenhower at least paid lip service to the idea that they were glad the casualty lists had come to an end. Patton made no bones about it. He had seen his chance, his one big chance for glory, taken away from him. Well, at Camp Meade, Maryland, Patton's hopes were revived when he met a young, optimistic lieutenant colonel named Ike, who, like Patton, was commanding a tank battalion. Now, the two men's love of these unreliable, snorting mechanical beasts would cement a friendship that would last almost to the end of their days. And Ike and George, as they came to know each other, spent many a day experimenting with tanks, firing new weapons, coming up with combinations of men and machine, and generally enjoying